Hello, I'm Lee Thornton. Today, a moment with filmmaker Haile Gerima, who directs movies that are anything but Hollywood. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Before we talk, Kim Skeen reports on the man and his movies.
Carolina, you waiting Africans, step out and tell your story.
My film projects are projects that I feel I would like them to exist along all the other stories told, without coming at the stories saying, are they credible? Can they sell? Would people watch them? These are things that censor stories from people. So what I do is I don't ask those questions. I say, well, I'm hungered for this story, so I go out of my way for years to find the money to do them.
As an independent filmmaker, Haile Gerima avoids conforming to what he calls the Hollywood formula.
It's just your accent, your temperament, altering it to speak like in those movies they have made standard itself is almost a cultural genocide. To me, all human beings have a very unique accent in the way they tell their story. So the thing is not the theme. The theme is universal. You know, love, hate, betrayal.
Gerima has learned independence requires funding. He spent 9 years raising the money to produce his most acclaimed film, Sankofa, a dramatic tale of African resistance to slavery.
My wife and me, we believed in it and said, even if nobody came to see it, it has to be exorcised out of us. I had to do it. It was like I was obsessed by it.
The award-winning film drew huge audiences and long lines at theaters.
It was very powerful to see, millions of black people hugging me, crying, and thanking me, and from here to South Africa, and saying, with all its imperfection, they didn't mind because it quenched a hunger. Who's going to tell it uncompromised, even imperfectly?
Gerima's written, directed, and produced movies and documentaries. He's editing a new film called Taser, a drama set in his homeland of Ethiopia.
Okay. Lay that track there, but at least have it here.
Okay. It's part of his soul. Like, his scripts become part of his soul. So he works and he knows them, and it's just pieces of himself, so he can just spew them out.
His edit room is located in a multi-purpose center Gerima created with his wife. Sankofa, a video and bookstore and soon-to-be coffee shop, is also a local meeting place. He says it's liberated territory for independent thinking.
The unique contribution, I think, in the independent scene is my ability to do low-budget films. That craft I have developed very well, and I'm proud of that. So what I do is, I said to myself, transfer this to young people.
He does that as a professor of cinema at Howard University. He also conducts a free script writing workshop at Sankofa.
Once a person gives you the benefit of listening to you, you owe them to listen back to their feedback.
He allows you to do just that, to find your voice. And he doesn't necessarily persuade you to go in any one direction. And I think that he's not, when he teaches cinema, he's not trying to make carbon copies of himself.
Young people have a capacity to recharge your battery. They can inspire you.
Gerima believes filmmakers have the power to heal the past by telling their stories.
For me, telling stories, however irrelevant society thinks, if it's resonating in you, there's some force wanting to tell it. And if that society doesn't want to hear it today, they might hear it 100 years from now. But your job is to tell it, to scream it.
Haile Gerima will continue telling stories. He already has ideas for future films. Kim Skeen reporting for A Moment With.
So good, so visual, your work. Stories that are part of the soul. one of your students said. And you bring to that a different personal history. You're Ethiopian by birth, and it is Gerima. Yes, Gerima, I want to say it properly. Your father was a writer, your mother was a teacher,
Yes.
and you had your early education in Ethiopia.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
Well, it's not only my mother and my father, but also my grandmother. You know, I grew up, I was one of the 10 kids when electricity came to our house. And before electricity, we all sat around the fireplace listening to our grandmother. And for me, storytelling is just a way of life. And I also, became aware at early age that telling your story is how you also grow as a person, reciprocating with people who listen to your story. And that is my earlier nurturing.
Your grandmother then, now, griot tradition is West African, you are East African. What's the counterpart? Was she the counterpart of the griot in East Africa?
Yeah, it's
What are they called?
Well, I would say in our language, it will be like Margeta or Manakuse. It all implies elders who have the right to speak to you, to give you the context of your existence. And that, I think, is universal.
What kind of stories did she tell?
Well, mostly about, for example, she, oftentimes uses the stories of animals, but it's about value system, a way of life, and the kind of manners and relationship one needs to cultivate in the context of a community. But she also taught history. My grandmother was she was actually in favor of another king that Haile Selassie overthrew. And so she was very politically folklorist, telling us about this true king who should have been a king. So it's also political around the fire education.
Added to that storytelling tradition was the fact that you also were part of a theatrical troupe that your father maintained.
Yes, he did have a very, in fact, I had to come to Chicago to really appreciate him, because in a drama school at Goodman School of Drama, I learned how mobile theater at the time of the early 60s, late 70s was becoming a phenomenon. My father did it in this town. He used to take us away from the town with a play and shows this historical drama he wrote.
Now you came to the Goodman School of Drama in the 60s.
Yes,
as
late
a
60s.
20-year-old?
21.
21. And so began your American journey.
Yes.
And from there you went to UCLA to study film.
Well, initially I went to really continue in theater until I made the transition by accident into filmmaking.
Tell me about your earliest film work and how you came to know what you wanted to do. You were in California. This is well before the break that Hollywood gave to Spike Lee. But did you ever want to do commercial film?
No. It was a group of African American, Native Americans. At the time we called Chicanos. We had a third world organization within Howard University, within UCLA, and our thing was, at that time, part and parcel of the political climate of the country, the world, globally, the whole politics of the world was shifting. And so we were actually watching, like many even who later became Hollywood big filmmakers, we were looking at cinema that asserted a new kind of narrative, a new kind of story. So the whole climate was so political. Everybody was, very phobic towards Hollywood. So for me, I was part and parcel of that. And so when every film we were trying to make, we were trying to find our voice, our identity, and not submit to the formula. So it's the climate.
So you knew virtually from the beginning that you would be an independent filmmaker.
Oh yeah, as I went to the film school, I would say I was confused in Chicago, but once I got to UCLA and then stumbled into cinema at the time of the political crisis of my personal life, then cinema became a weapon for me to really comprehend my own turbulence.
Cinema as a weapon. You've said that. I've read that you've said that. Talk more about that idea.
Well, you know, it's in the end really a weapon. It's not like, I prefer it than gun because it's a weapon to convince people or to tell people your story. And so for me, even the exploitation cinema is really a weapon in the end of an idea that comes. You can go to a simple village in Latin America or Africa. A single movie would come and the people would change their lips, their hair, their nose, everything by one movie. And that implication and what it does to other people and the way it alters their way of life is the most unresearched, unstudied, the most ignored phenomenon.
Did you ever try to go through the system to distribute your film, say, for Sankofa, for example?
We did at the time, but the hostility we were met was, very enormous.
How did it manifest itself?
For example, Sankofa opened big in Berlin, at the Berlin International Film Festival. We made the film in a basement here in Washington, D.C. with meager, small money from international co-production groups we put together. And when we opened it, the American press, the American film, spokespeople were totally hostile because, one, it didn't come from them, it's not sponsored from them, and they couldn't handle it. So we were met by hostility, although we were the only independent independently made film that was in competition with all these mega Hollywood films. And that was not even spoken about. When we did Berlin, then Montreal, Toronto, the press from NPR to everything ignored us until the black community in America sponsored us through this idea of Sankofa family and opened it, and then you see Washington Post, Time Magazine, New York Times, because black people lined up. But before that, we were literally omitted. So it didn't give us a chance to even present our product for so-called the profit relationship. It was just hostility. You can believe it. One movie could create such a hostility. It awakened us.
Well, it's hard for me to believe you made that film in a basement.
We did.
It's so visually rich.
Did. Oh yeah, we did. Well, the actual editing, the production company was under my basement, but the editing we did, it was shot in 35. We had the audacity without the money to shoot in 35. We edited in Virginia at a Bono Film Lab. And the production value, we were bent on making it be in the level of any a film made in the system. In fact, most people would estimate it to be a $16 to $18 million budget, the production value, but we did only for $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah.
$1 million is a lot of money when you have to raise it from scratch. How does an independent filmmaker do that?
Well, initially we tried, for example, to raise it within the community. We went around, we tried all the grant routes. Sometimes we got seed money, but often very discouragement, money that could not really finance historical drama. So what we did was we tried to cultivate African countries that have resources. We put together a German television production deal, British television, Channel 4. So all that, over the 9 years period that took us, we were able to piecemeal the budget, the money, the finance, to ultimately do the film. Not that we had the million at the beginning of the film, but just as we went along, we inched. We shot the first part in Jamaica with big support from individuals and people. And then a year later, we shot the African part as we raised more money.
You take on quite a mantle as an independent filmmaker.
That is the only way we could do it. There's no other way.
We have a clip from it that we saw bits and pieces in the package, but we have another clip. Let's watch that, and then I want to talk more about it.
Why